What is up, ladies and gents? It's your boy Lou Streets, and I'm back with another video. And in this video, I'm talking about something that just hit me about 5 minutes ago, so it's fresh off the dome. Bear with me if I ramble a little bit, because this idea just hit me. But I've been playing Kazuya in Tekken 8 lately, and I've been practicing him a ton because he's very difficult to use. And then it dawned on me, as a fighting game player, do you guys feel like that fighting games kind of teach you the successful building blocks of life? Because if you think about it, when you step back from it, all the things that we apply to fighting games, you can apply to your actual life and try to use those pillars to succeed, right? Think about it. The reason I say this is because we play fighting games in a one-on-one situation, whether that be against a computer or against like an online opponent or just a friend, right? But let's just say, for the sake of this scenario, we're talking about playing against a one-on-one online opponent. So the truth is, whether you win or lose, the blame is always up to you. So it kind of forces you to take ownership of the scenario, because let's say that you're playing against like a busted character or something like that. Unless you're gonna stop playing the game, which will make you a quitter internally, then pretty much you gotta find a solution and solve it, right? But if you think about that, that same logic that you would apply to a fighting game, if you don't use that in the real world, then your chance of succeeding is just a lot lower, because you have to adjust to the scenario. Because unlike the fighting game that you would quit, you really can't quit in life. And if you do, the outcome is gonna be good anyway, right? You're not gonna succeed the same way you wouldn't win the fight. So as I've said, I've been practicing Kazuya for like the past 2 weeks, and he's very difficult to learn from an execution standpoint, from a very nuanced standpoint, from his range, from his reach. He has good damage, but he's an overall hard character to pilot, right? Compared to Law, who I'm really good with Law, and Law has his own difficulty, but he's much easier to use than Kazuya. But the funny thing is that I've had more fun playing Kazuya the past 2 weeks, and it's not because I like him more than Law, it's more so because he's so difficult to use, he kind of forces me to accept the challenge. And then it made me realize, you know how fighting games is such a small niche? Like, they say that if you want to make content, you should make it in fighting games because it'll be hard to kind of blow up because it's just a small niche. Well, I start thinking, is it a small niche because people don't like to solve problems? Because when it comes to fighting games, you have to take scenarios and find a way to put them to your advantage. So whether that's execution, punishing your opponent, getting around a busted move, figuring out spacing, whatever the case may be, you have to take a scenario and solve it. It's not just entertainment, because in reality, you don't have a ton of fun losing, but at the same time, in losing, you can learn. And that's kind of how life works out. But the average person doesn't want to really deal with those problems. They'll project, they'll blame others, they won't accept accountability. And I started to think that for us hardcore fighting game players, are we wired to kind of have the building blocks to succeed in life? Because in reality, every single lesson or principle that you could apply to a fighting game, you could apply that to real life, because it takes repetition, practice, perseverance, overcoming an obstacle. That's how you succeed in fighting games. And in reality, that's how you succeed in real life. And I don't mean success as far as like being rich or a multimillionaire, but as far as just dealing with adversity. In fighting games, you only can have fun if you learn things and get better. But you're only gonna learn things by losing. And life is kind of the same way, but a lot of people, they don't ever overcome their losses because they don't want to learn the lesson and apply the perseverance and the adjustments with their strategy as far as how they're living their life the way that we do in fighting games. Do you agree or do you disagree? Because it could sound like I'm being a bit philosophical, but as I said, this just hit me, so it's kind of a fresh thought. But it just really clicked to me like a good 10 minutes ago. Like, it's the same reason that I love to do like words with friends or like solve puzzles or just like brain teasing challenges that I'm into. Like when I solve the riddles on Batman Arkham Asylum, or just like stuff that teases and challenges the brain, you know, being articulate, being able to read, being able to kind of just sharpen the mind. Is it a thing that's why I like fighting games? Or is it that because I'm a fighting game player, I like those things? It's like a chicken and the egg theory, right? But do you guys kind of feel where I'm coming from? So I know I could sound like a bit spacey, but an example of this that I have was like doing electrics and doing wave dashes. Because it's not necessarily easy to do, but you know that it's doable. And like the other night, I was practicing live on stream, and I kind of started to figure some things out that'll make it click a little bit. So I was like, I'm gonna try it right quick. I might mess it up, but I'm gonna try it one time, right? Let's see how this works. So the new strategy that I tried to implement was that if I press more down than forward, when I'm pressing down forward for the electric, it'll come out. So let's see if I can get it right. First try, I got it right. Now, the funny thing about this is that I learned this live in stream because like it was a weird conversation I was having with my chat because they were basically saying, hey Lou, you got to do it this way. And I'm telling the chat like, yo, I know how to do it, but it's hard to duplicate it because I'm still trying to find that little nugget to make it click. And it was so funny going back and forth with the chat on this. Like this was just like 2 or 3 days ago. That's why it's fresh in my mind. It was so funny going back and forth with the chat on this because they're saying, hey Lou, press forward for neutral, then press down forward too. But the thing with Kazuya is that if you get any form of a frame that's down forward 1, it won't hit. Like even if you look at the command history, you see how it says down for 2 frames, then down forward 2? That's why the electric worked. What I was trying to explain to the chat is that I know what I'm supposed to do, but I need some type of piece of nugget of information to make it click, and that's only gonna happen through experience and repetition. And after I did it enough times, while it is still hard to do, I started to figure out like, oh, if I press the controller right here, it kind of gives me this scenario where it works into my advantage. And the reason I say that is because, granted, it took me like 20 minutes to learn this, but imagine how frustrating it's been when I've been playing this character for 2 weeks and I really couldn't get it down. Because the hardest part of solving any scenario is simply knowing what do I even need to attempt to do. And I feel like a lot of times when people get stuck in life or they just like go through like those ruts in life, they don't really like know what to do and like how to adjust to something. And if you think about that in a fighting game, most of the frustrating or broken things, once you figure out how to get around them, they tend to be very simple. The problem is knowing the approach or knowing the solution. Think about it. Have you ever played a fighting game where like you're playing against like what's one I can think of? Like somebody like Jade in Mortal Kombat 11, right? She was super annoying because everything she did was safe and she had crazy range, and you would get fucked up trying to like pressure her, but she would frustrate you so much because she would keep you away. It was only until I developed patience that I started to beat all types of Jade players. But if you think about that, that's no different than in real life. When you're trying to get to a certain goal, patience usually isn't a virtue, especially when it comes to like something financial and like you really need something to shake. But in reality, you're gonna just keep banging your head against the wall if you don't have the patience to find the right approach. And I think in fighting games that applies all over the place, especially in a game like Tekken 8, because Tekken 8 can be very frustrating. If you play Tekken 8 ranked, you know exactly what I mean. Between rage quitters, between matchup knowledge, between getting blasted for points when you lose 2 or 3 games, Tekken can be extremely frustrating. In reality, if you don't have the right mentality to grind Tekken in a way where you're learning and you're not just like playing through anger, you're never going to get better at it, right? And that's kind of the same thing in life. Like, if you just going through life angry and frustrated, but you're not really like trying to find a solution, try not to find like an actual strategy to overcome a scenario, you're never going to get through. And so I wonder, to my fighting game players who watch my videos and check these things out all the time, I want to know in the comments, when you run into like adversity in your actual life, is there any part of the fighting game mentality that you feel like kind of clicks in to say, you know, the way I would solve this matchup or like learn this character strategy or like lose to learn and then apply and adjust? Do you feel like that you use those same principles in real life? Because personally for me, I think that I do. The only thing about me is I don't know if it's because I like fighting games that I do that, or because I do that, that's why I like fighting games. Because I have the type of brain where I like to solve scenarios. Now granted, like everybody else, I'm human, I get tilted. In real life, I can scream, get frustrated. Like all those things happen to us because we're real people, right? But overall, do you feel that when you come into an obstacle that you treat it like a fighting game scenario? Like I'm gonna just pause for a second and ask you guys, is that something that you do? When you come into an obstacle in real life, do you kind of treat it like a fighting game scenario? And then the next thing that I'll ask is, if you do actually do that, does that have an effect on like the characters that you like? Like for instance, I'm not a huge Dragon Ball fan, right? I love Dragon Ball, but I'm not somebody that like watches a ton of anime and like keeps up like all character lore and manga and all that stuff, right? However, by far, in Dragon Ball Fighters, I'm a Vegeta main, right? But the reason I'm a Vegeta main is because I just like who his personality is in the actual show, because Vegeta pretty much had to grind his way to get to where he's at, right? Like, he's the type of character that he wasn't really like just talented off the rip. You know, Goku gets all the shine, Goku gets all the victories. They treat my boy Vegeta like shit. But Vegeta's claim to fame is that I'm never gonna give up, I'm never gonna quit, I'm gonna find a solution, I'm gonna train, I'm gonna get better. Well, in reality, that's the same way I approach fighting games, and more importantly, that's the actual way that I approach life. Because there's a lot of things that I've been through in my life where it's like, it could have broke me down if I was weak-minded, but I'm just the type of person, I love to find the solution. I think in reality, you probably can't even enjoy fighting games without finding the solution. Like, think about this. If you play a shooting game, anytime that you lose, you could just say that they was faster than me, because the strategy never really changes. I mean, you can use the map to your advantage. You can find your favorite weapons. You can find your favorite ordnance or something like that. But overall, the strategy really doesn't change outside of just like map placement, the weapon that you're using, how to sharpen your aim. But for the most part, it's I shoot my opponent before he shoots me. So even though you can master that as far as aim and shooting your opponent first, there's a certain level of redundancy in that. But when it comes to fighting games, you could legitimately be playing against a friend of yours, right? And you could be just beating the brakes off your friends. Then they could pick a different character and you don't know the matchup, and now you never beat your friend again. Now you can either get tilted and say that your friend is getting carried by this garbage character, which they could be to some extent, but that doesn't change the fact you have to solve the scenario. So I just wonder, when it comes to fighting games, is that kind of the building blocks for like life in general? And maybe that's the reason why that niche is small, because fighting games, they are entertaining to the people who are good, but you're never going to get good without losing, and most people don't like to lose at anything. And then you got to add into the fact that when it comes to fighting games, you might lose for a long time. Like, depending on how simple or how complex a fighting game is, you might lose for a long time to master your character and master matchups. But then once you figure it out, you win a large amount, but it took like a lot of grind and understanding to get there. Like, a lot of times in fighting games, it's not even about the actual skills that you have in the controller. It's about the game mechanics and understanding how things work. So until you have a real mental understanding of what scenarios mean, what mechanics mean, how they apply to certain situations, until you figure that out, you can't really master your character, because the core mechanics of the game play too much of a larger role. And if you look at that in a real life perspective, you got to figure out how certain systems work. You know, how does making money work? How do I stack up money? If I was to start a business, how do I market my business? How do I get my name out there? Like, I'm not saying that this is like just a one-size-fits-all problem, but I'm pretty much saying the mentality that you take into fighting games, it probably will serve you in the real world better more often than not if you're approaching things the same exact way. And so I don't want this video to be crazy long, because it is kind of like a stream of consciousness in a way. But I'm just wondering, and let me know in the comments, do you guys enjoy fighting games because you're naturally a problem solver? Or do you enjoy solving problems because you're a fighting game player? Let me try to reword that for it to make more sense. In other words, let's say that you're the type of person that solves puzzles, solves brain teasers, solves riddles and things like that. Would that draw you to a fighting game because in your mind a fighting game feels like a riddle to solve to get better? Or is it that your dad or your uncle or somebody had you playing fighting? Like, you know, you younger guys, Mortal Kombat was around and was popular like since I was like 5, 4, 6 years old, right? So from the first time that your uncle or your father or your older brother put a controller in your hand and had you playing fighting games, was it that the better you got at the fighting game, it pushed you to kind of use that same mentality to solve problems? Or was it the other way around, where you had a natural knack for solving problems, so it drew you towards fighting games? I'm very curious about this, and I don't want this video to be too long. And I know that it sounds like I might be rambling just a bit, but for the guys who see this video, let me know in the comments. When you go through a real problem in life, there's your fighter game mentality kick in. Like when your back is against the wall, when you need to make something happen, when you need to make some money, when you need to get over a breakup, when you need to find a new job or a new opportunity or relocate to a new city, does that kind of back against the wall, you know, put my fist up, I'm gonna figure this out kind of kick in? Granted, I'm not talking about like punching, like actual violence or like fighting back, but I'm just saying, like, does your mind kind of go into a space where it's like, I gotta figure out the matchup? You know what I'm saying? In life, not just the game, but like, does your mind go to a space where it's like, I'm going to figure out the matchup? And then it also seems like whenever you're trying to figure out the matchup, you give yourself advantages based on the actions you take. So like in real life, that could be applying for some jobs, or if you got a job, maybe putting some more money to the side and spending less, maybe disciplining yourself to go to the gym because you want to get healthier. Does that same kind of, I'm going to solve this problem and figure out the matchup, do you feel like that's the same mentality that kicks in when you're like, I'm going to practice this character for an hour, I'm going to see how this move works, I'm going to see how to use this mechanic to my advantage, I'm going to learn this matchup for this guy that keeps beating with this same character? I want to know, does that same style of mentality kick in, Or do you think it's two different things in two different areas of your life? Or do you feel like that they're kind of like symmetrical? Because for myself, I think that the reason I play fighting games more than my other games is because I kind of enjoy the challenge, like the mental task of figuring it out. When I want to just kind of chill and decompress and play games for fun, that's usually like when I pop in the shooting game, because that's more about reaction and skill and aim. But the strategy doesn't really change. It's just about, I gotta shoot you before you shoot me. But when it comes to fighting games and I'm in that mode to kind of solve a scenario, you know, lab a matchup with a friend or something like that, that's when like the riddle solving side of me kind of kicks in. And I want to know with you guys, do you feel that same thing? And if so, do you apply that same thing to your actual life? So this video is longer than I want it to be already because I've been rambling for quite some time. But let me know in the comments, do you feel your fighting game mentality applies to real life? Let me know. Till next time, it's your boy Lou Streets. I'm out. Peace.